First of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to this very interesting seminar. And I think after Dr. Navin's speech, I'm going to take a slightly different trajectory altogether. But before that, I just want to request IKS also to look at if there any solutions are there in the past where we can manage the time in this kind of events. And most of the places we skip that event time and we forget the time and we keep talking about it. But so I think there should be some solution for that also. I'm coming from BASE University. When you say BASE, it's only economics. So as usual, economists are very narrow-minded. So I'll limit myself to economic topic. And just to tell about BASE University, it's a state-run university, unitary university in Bengaluru, which is having courses on economics, UG as well as PG. And I think we'll be the first to complete first batch of NEP in the country by April, May. So we are much ahead of all the universities and we'll be completing NEP. And also want to tell you that we also practice some of the things that is there in NEP, and we have introduced course on economics of heritage. Okay, so this is the first time in the country where economics of heritage has been implemented, and we have successfully, teaching the course. Unlike my usual presentations, I'm going to read out some of my written speech. In fact, a month ago we were in Pune, Professor Pushpa Savdathi was there, and there I was trying to give extempore based on some of the points. Then I went back and I thought, like, why can't I write a small note on whatever I spoke that time, and I just wrote some 5-6 pages note. It's not a long, lengthy note, but anyway, I'll try to complete as much as possible. And in the meantime, we also organized Kautilya Conference in collaboration with Chanakya University, IKS, and other institutions with Isaac Bangalore. And whatever the learning that I have is based on that presentation, that conference, and we're actually bringing out a book based on that conference. One of the reasons, as I think that Naveen already pointed out, one of the reasons why it is still not getting into the young minds is that we are still not making things simple. Okay, so I think until unless we don't make it simple, we don't make it for the mass, it is very difficult for the knowledge system to reach to the people. And this is where we thought we should bring this Kautilya conference proceedings for the mass. So we make it very simple and we try to see to what extent Kautilya's Arthashastra is relevant. And I must congratulate the IKS for doing that conference, and we have been looking forward to get that book for the mass circulation, and I'm sure it will be part of courses in all the colleges. It was a deliberate act that we want to make it very simple. Until unless you don't know Sanskrit, I myself cannot understand many of the things that's happening. So we need to make it more simple and reach to the masses. I am going to speak about the economics, how the Indian knowledge systems can really contextualize the economics in the whole discourse that we have right now. When we talk of economics and IKS, all of us will remember Arthashastra of Kautilya, right? We all remember that, but when you look at Indian textbooks or any foreign textbooks, if you ask who is father of economics, we keep saying Adam Smith. I think that is the place that is where we are right now. And we don't really understand that father of economics is not necessarily Adam Smith, because before that there's so much of literature, and Kautilya's Arthashastra is an invaluable part of India's heritage, and I think that needs to be brought to the core of economics discourse in the country. So we have organized this conference, and the conference provided us with an opportunity to broaden our view on that, what this ancient river textbook says, how it has been interpreted, how it should be studied, what relevance it can possibly have in the modern context, and also in full honesty, what aspects of it is less relevant. In fact, we think that whatever was there in the traditional system may be relevant for the current day, but I think we need to be very careful that I don't think we can accept that all the 100% that was available is relevant for the present context. It also brought together a wide range of issues and even wide range of perspectives from which to view those issues. If you talk about any action can have either intrinsic or instrumental value. We believe that a wholesome relation develops when both values are identified and acknowledged. Society does not have a wholesome, healthy relation with the prisons because they have only instrumental value. Society does not value a prison for its own sake. Money gets a bad rap because it is argued that it is only has instrumental value. We cannot, after all, eat money or sleep on a pillow made literally with the notes and coins. Considerations of philosophy and religion are considered by some to have only intrinsic value when viewed purely from the perspective of personal belief. In the modern day, of course, religion does in fact have a lot of influence on almost every other area of public discourse. Lay persons looking towards the discipline of history can only develop a healthy relation with the subject if they appreciate the intrinsic as well as instrumental values that it holds out. I think the distinction is that there is an intrinsic value, there is an instrumental value when we talk about heritage. If they believe that history has no relevance for the current day, or that a knowledge of history does not give the population a sense of rootedness, a sense of cultural identity, or that history only studies a subject that catches her fancy and it has no relation with the world she inhibits, they will ignore it. These select examples are listed only to highlight the importance of both values in the subject of study, that is both intrinsic and instrumental. A piece of research based on a historical material can be justified as having intrinsic value to the authors, but this intrinsic value as well as instrumental value must be made evident to any potential readers. IKS has been pioneering this effort in reviving our understanding of historical knowledge, and we urge them to guard against a domination of the instrumental element in a piece of research over the intrinsic value. The pragmatism of instrumental value, though important, cannot be all. Any rewriting of old anthology, that the way we are trying to do right now, should retain both intrinsic as well as instrumental values. For instance, any interpretation of Arthashastra should retain its intrinsic value. In a way, it is befitting for the social science scholars of India and maybe even social scientists world over to know about one of the oldest and greatest surviving pieces of scholarly work in depth for its own sake. Regarding the instrumental value, Arthashastra covers such a wide array of subjects that it will take great effort to not see parallels with social, political and economic questions under consideration at the individual and also at the national level today. Any rewriting would surely help our modern policy makers if recommendations were feasible to be gleaned. It is also well within the range of acceptable academic practice to study the ancient Indian Kautilian prescriptions as they were a couple of millennia earlier, or consider the differences from current practice. Since the Arthashastra is about statecraft, policy making is an obvious area of research focus. In fact, in the write-up that I have, I bring three important issues when the IKS do this exercise. It is very important to keep these three aspects. One is that the context specificity. Because the Kautilya Arthashastra is written 2000 years ago, now to what extent that is useful right now is something that is very important. The first observation is about context specificity. The difference in the context from the time of the writing of the Arthashastra, I think this will be same for many other texts, and that from the lived context of the modern reader of the text are different. In fact, we came to know about Arthashastra only 100 years ago. So in between so many things have happened, and I think this is very important. This difference comes purely by virtue of the time that has elapsed and the resultant drastic changes in societal and political structures. Any attempt to extract pearls of wisdom from this ancient text must first acknowledge this fact. There are translation challenges about certain words and their associated multi-dimensional notions being untranslatable into a language that was born in different cultural meaning. Another example for the context specificity is that a blind reliance on the past might just lead to the replacement of one set of colonial laws by another set of regressive colonial systems. For instance, imposition of a legal system propounded by Arthashastra, which was grounded in an oppressive caste-based socio-economic system. There are critics suggest Shamshastri's translation is found to be heavily tipped with a Western lens, resulting in a transformation rather than a translation of the text. I think this is where I would like to bring that distinction. When we talk about ancient knowledge system, there is a need to differentiate between translation and transformation. So it leads to a wrong conclusion that the Arthashastra was a forerunner of specific laws, terms and processes that exist in the current common law system. This is quite impossible given that the laws and judicial process evolved to match the societal requirement. They reflect the society that they are meant to protect and are unlikely to remain stagnant for over 2000 years. Besides, English laws and processes were themselves a transplant or colonial. Another interesting issue that fits our context specificity is the issue of regulation of gambling and lessons from Arthashastra. The Arthashastra classified gambling as immoral and listed out its negative social impact. The scale may be larger at present given the spread of online gambling, but the present legal framework, wherein the gambling and betting are classified in the state list of the 7th schedule of the Constitution, is shown to cause an uneven response by states. For instance, while some states have banned the sale of lottery tickets, others continue to allow it. For the people of one state could easily purchase lotteries in another state. Kautilya proposes a market-based solution instead of an outright ban. He calls for stipulated gambling houses with tight regulations to prevent cheating and the imposition of 5% tax on gains. While Kautilya based this decision on a cost-benefit analysis, is a question modern scholarship unable to address. Drawing from the Arthashastra, one can argue for central regulation to ensure uniformity of regulation across the states. The summary is that I think when we are doing the translation and trying to reach to the people, I think we need to keep that context as very important, thing. Another observation we would like to make in this regard, which does not find reflection directly in this compendium, is that about the democratic nature of the Indian polity today and the essentially non-democratic context in which Arthashastra was conceived and composed. So I think this is another distinction that we thought we should bring it to the people. And the second aspect is when we are doing this, bringing that knowledge from the ancient books for the current context, we also need to, there are two different ways one can do. Reconstruction. I think reconstruction is something that we need to look at, and there are two different ways of reconstruction. That is, one is the rational reconstruction, and other one is historical reconstruction. When you say rational reconstruction, as I said that whatever it is written in the past, when you are trying to reconstruct it, what you do is you always try to make it, context specific. I think that is something, a rational reconstruction as a rereading of older book works properly through a modern lens, such that the old ideas of the author are largely ignored in favor of the rationalization. In fact, you start looking at rationalization of some of the things that has been said. So in that context, what happens is that the originality actually loses. But when it comes to historical reconstruction of an older work attempts to dig deep into the context of the age. It attempts to locate the ideas in the appropriate setting, and it attempts to peep into the mental processes that led to the ideas under the study. This process is also more important for a truly meaningful study of ancient books like Arthashastra. So there are two things that I brought in. One is the context specificity, translation issues, and the third is how you reconstruct it. I think when you go for, in fact, there are some critics who argue that Shyam Shastri's translation is to some extent a rational reconstruction in some of the aspects, because it's so difficult for you to really contextualize that in the current day society. So there are some parts of translation, it appeared that it is more of a rational reconstruction. But there are, most of the translation is historical reconstruction, but I think there are some aspects which has been, rational reconstruction. In fact, if you look at the current day context, we also think that Kautilya's Arthashastra has not been followed anywhere. I think that is another misconception that we have. But if you look at the large part of contribution of Kautilya's is actually on the good governance. So if you look at the good governance, in fact he specifies 8 aspects of good governance in his book. And fortunately UNESCO in 1970s, when they formed this good governance concept, they actually put all these 8 concepts under 3 subheadings, and they say under the UNESCO good governance, they have 3 aspects, that is rule of law and transparency, responsiveness and accountability, effectiveness and efficiency. So all these 8 aspects of Kautilya has already been emphasized by UNESCO. In fact, there are other areas where taxation is one, because as an economist we always think that Kautilya is more of a public financial specialist. So if you look at the text, I think there is also a lot of reference to taxation. In fact, taxation principle prescribed in Arthashastra relates to those prescriptions with modern day practices in India in a way that is convincing and relevant. So when I say there is a kind of a reconstruction happened practically when it comes to public policy in India, and there is some aspects of Arthashastra has been followed. Elsewhere, the ancient text explore the concept of welfare state and how it needs to be achieved through taxation as well as good governance. It talks about equity and rationality being the 2 major characteristics of taxation, and how a wise king needs to ensure taxing only once, because we have a concept of cascading impact in the taxation principles, and in fact this has been discussed in Arthashastra in almost 200 years back. There is one more aspect that I thought, status of women and how it is addressed in the modern times, a case of historical construction rather than one of convenience. In fact, again, when you look at the translation, the status of women is not been really represented in the translation versions. Maybe I'll skip some of the aspects. I just wanted to come to one important aspect. I think when it comes to welfare economics, how Arthashastra dealt with and how we are actually following in the modern day. Governments across the world have been trying to enhance the people's welfare through various interventions. The concept of welfare that we currently employ is largely based on the Western idea that focuses more on material welfare. A good example is the Human Development Index created by the United Nations, and the debate surrounding that concept has actually ignored the moral aspects of human development. What has started as a measure of human deprivation ended up as an inverse measure of human development. The Human Development Index focuses exclusively on material development, taking in equal measure income, education and life expectancy. The Arthashastra recommends that human welfare, if that is what to be measured, must include material, ethical and spiritual development. The argument is that human development measured by the HDI as output would reduce human deprivation as an outcome. This is debatable. In fact, I want to bring this particular issue here. In fact, it was Professor V.R. Panchamukhi, who was the founder of CMDR, in late 1990s, during that whole debate of HDI-related discussion, spoke and wrote about these ethical and spiritual aspects of economic development, and indeed he brought out a book. It's called Indian Classical Thoughts on Economic Development and Management. Now, after 30 years, we all realize that HDI is not a a right measure, and we need to look at what Professor Panchamukhi has highlighted in that early discussion period. In this context, we also need to bring in one more issue, and I'll stop there. The concept that we are talking about right now is, if all of you, I'm sure all of you followed G20 deliberations. Actually, India has given a top concept called Mission Life, that is lifestyle for sustainable development. It was lifestyle for environment, but I think the G20 members has opposed that, and they said it should be called as lifestyle for sustainable development. It appears to be a better concept than the Human Development Index, although it's still far from the ancient philosophy that focuses more on ethical and spiritual development and less of material development. Life is more of a qualitative concept, less quantifiable. This is one of the major contributions of India under G20 presidency. We have often felt that the concept of GDP, gross domestic product, has very little to do with human welfare. It may have done more damage than good for the human perspective. As our ancient knowledge suggests, it is important for the governments to have human-centric approach and move gently and cautiously away from the GDP approach. Life is very small effort in that direction. It is an ethical and moral concept, unlike a Human Development Index. Efforts are on to establish a Mission Life Club, similar to the Paris Club that we talk about for the investment, to enhance our understanding of welfare from a more holistic perspective. As discussed in, similar to what is discussed in Kautilya's Arthashastra, and push for public policy towards non-material aspects of human life. So, in conclusion, what I'm trying to bring it to this audience is that when we actually start learning lessons from the past, I think we need to have a structure, and we need to be careful to what extent it's going to be relevant, and I think we need to contextualize, and I'm sure the Indian knowledge system, I know that a lot number of people are working under IKS. I'm sure they take care of this, and that is one way where we can actually reach more youngsters, and at least they can start thinking about it. So I think simplicity is another thing that we also need to look at, how we can make things very simple. I know what's happening even after 75 years. We don't have one good textbook in economics in local languages. So I think that disconnect is something is in all the places. I hope going forward, when we talk about learning from ancient texts, I think we should look for a simple but at a mass level kind of a reach. I think we need to look for. Thank you so much.